That evening, sitting in the little hotel room by yourself with Gary, I realized life shocks you are unpredictable. Already I was anxious as my husband Logan had been abroad for several months in another city. I missed him certainly, but it wasn't just about his not being around. It was his negligence, his lack of interest. That was the true problem. Though lonely evenings were eating away at my soul, how could I have realized that asking my stepson Gary to bring me to your dad would result in us cooped in a small hotel room with one bed? What was going to happen eluded me. Allow me to cover every minute detail from the very beginning. I promise you, the conclusion of this narrative will be far more fascinating than you could ever imagine. I glanced quickly in the mirror that morning as I was leaving the house. I was tense, certainly, but I still looked fantastic. Even with Logan leaving me so alone, I still felt attractive, still felt alive. But even those sensations weren't enough anymore. They didn't please me. Gary was finishing his breakfast in the kitchen when I yelled out from behind, "I know you enter college at the end of this summer, but you still have to improve your driving. Come on, take me to your dad." He looked up at me, the same mischievous grin on his face he always wore. Gary was a nice kid with a quirky, hilarious side, yet he could be such a little rascal at times. "All fine, stepmom," he said taunting, "but on one condition. Tell Dad to purchase me a nicer automobile for the summer. We'll speak about it," I replied forcefully, ushering him off. Inside, though, I was simply thinking, let's just get this journey over with. But I had no notion the voyage wouldn't go as planned. We'd been driving for nearly 2 hours. I was in the back seat, fooling around on my phone, while Gary sang along to some odd song on the radio, tossing out ridiculous quips every now and then that just made him chuckle. Then all of a sudden, the automobile produced this dreadful sound, a hiss, and then died altogether. "What's happening?" I asked, trying not to seem too spooked out. "I guess the car broke down," Gary murmured, pulling over to the side of the road, evidently angry. So there we were, trapped in the middle of nowhere. The signal on my phone was hardly there, and there wasn't anyone nearby to help. We spent 2 hours fighting, phoning every technician we could locate and attempting to fix the blasted thing. Finally, we had to accept the obvious. The only choice was to spend the night at the closest hotel. At the motel reception, as Gary chatted with the person at the desk, I stood behind him, annoyed as hell. If Logan learns about this, he's going to lose it, I thought. But curiously, in that moment, I didn't feel like it mattered all that much. Deep down, I simply knew. Tonight was going to alter things. Before this tale gets weirder, make sure you subscribe to my channel and turn on those alerts. Trust me, you don't want to miss the remainder of this. By the end of it, I'd want to see your support in the comments and with those likes. When we went to the room and opened the door, all my expectations crashed and burned. The area was small, hardly big enough to spin around in. One bed, one nightstand, a weak flickering overhead light that made everything appear dismal. The ceiling seemed low, the AC hardly functioned, and the one little window merely faced the parking lot. "This is it?" I mumbled, dissatisfied. Gary stepped in behind me, chuckling. "What were you expecting? A 5-star hotel? We're simply here for one night. Relax, stepmom." His mocking tone in his speech, along with his cheeky grin, just made my aggravation greater. But at the same time, I couldn't say I fully loathed Gary's carefree, laid-back attitude. Being around him, even though I'd never acknowledge it, aroused something inside me, a kind of exhilaration I didn't really understand. "This heat is killing me," I murmured, stroking the back of my neck. "I believe I need a shower, or I'm truly going to pass out." "Certainly, certainly," Gary responded nonchalantly, flinging himself onto the bed and resting flat on his back. This is your domain, Carmen. Do everything you need to feel at home. I gazed at him for a second. His thin yet toned form, along with the subtle boyishness of his features, gave him a weird kind of attractiveness. But I instantly attempted to throw the concept out of my brain. He was Logan's kid, after all. My stepson. I walked into the bathroom and slammed the door behind me. For a time, I just gazed at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was plastered to my skin from the heat, yet I still looked nice. I still had that spark. Turning the shower on, I let the water run and walked under it, thinking it would wash away the tangle of emotions rising up inside me. I'm 47 years old, I thought. And Gary? Gary's not a kid anymore. He's 22, preparing to start college. And here we are, imprisoned together in this little motel room for a few days. The concept both troubled and aroused me in a manner I couldn't quite define. Logan popped into my head. Logan, I wanted to surprise you. I wanted to come visit you, to be with you. But now I'm here, imprisoned in this hotel room with your son, and I don't know how to feel about it. The steam from the shower filled the small bathroom, the heat calming my body even as my mind raced. Gary's grin, his easygoing personality. It was kindling something unexpected inside me. Standing under the stream of water, I couldn't tell what this spark may turn into, but I felt something was happening. Later, I decided to walk downstairs for supper and clear my thoughts a bit. I threw on a simple flowing outfit. It was ideal for the heat, but it also made me feel a bit more at ease, like I was trying to shake off this odd tightness. The hotel restaurant was modest but homey, suited for a setting this tiny. I ordered a light lunch and a glass of wine, believing it would help me relax. The sun had fallen, and the streetlights outside the motel were twinkling softly. Sitting there, I couldn't stop my thoughts from going back to the room upstairs. I wonder what Gary's up to right now, I wondered. Someone as restless and full of energy as him surely wasn't having much fun being imprisoned up in a tight room. But nevertheless, that casual attitude of his, so effortless, so carefree, was driving me mad in a manner I couldn't quite describe. When my wine was gone, I gave my dish a final glance and made my way upstairs, taking deliberate steps. When I approached the room, everything was extremely calm. I opened the door, and the image that confronted me left me briefly breathless. Gary had taken a shower and was resting on the bed in just a robe, utterly knocked out. His half-open robe displayed most of his slender, athletic figure. His moist hair fell over his forehead, and there was a small grin on his lips. Like he was dreaming, my heart started pumping. It was the last thing I anticipated to walk into. For a second, I hesitated beside the entrance, unsure of what to do. Inside me, there was this odd combination of feelings. I felt uncomfortable, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. Carmen, what the heck are you doing? That's Logan's son, I reprimanded myself mentally. But my eyes deceived me, drawn to the section of his robe that had slid more apart. What I saw aroused something warm inside me. The limited size of the room only made matters worse. There wasn't another bed. It was either sleep close to him or spend the remainder of the night in a chair. And in this heat, the concept of a chair seemed inconceivable. I moved inside the room carefully. Gary's steady, regular breathing filling the area. I took a long breath, attempting to focus, but the pandemonium inside me made it difficult to think clearly. I had to get myself together. Okay, Carmen, I mumbled to myself. It's only one night. Nothing more. This doesn't imply anything. I intended to surprise Logan, and now I'm stuck here. Be sensible. Keep it together. I took a few steps nearer the bed and stared at Gary. The innocent smile on his face just made my already convoluted thoughts even more difficult. I sat down on the side of the bed, wondering how I was going to make it through the night. In the middle of the night, a faint sound woke me up. I barely opened my eyes, just enough to search the room. I observed Gary shifting on the bed. He appeared half sleepy, running his hands through his hair and scratching his head softly. I found myself watching him, but I kept my eyes just slightly open, pretending to still be tired. Inside, though, I felt everything from tranquil. Then I felt it. His eyes are on me. My heart started racing. He was observing me. I attempted to keep up the act, maintaining the drowsy expression on my face and staying still. But inside, I was humming with activity. Slowly, Gary proceeded to unhook the belt of his robe. As it loosened, the robe dropped off his shoulders, showing more of his toned, youthful physique. The way his muscles twitched slightly with his moves brought a peculiar feeling through me. I couldn't stop myself. In that instant, I recognized two things. I had no control over what was occurring, and part of me didn't even want to stop it. Gary picked out a pair of shorts from the wardrobe. While doing so, he kept peering back at me, as if trying to figure out whether I was awake. His glances got me even more eager. I was trying hard not to give anything away, but at the same time, I allowed the moment to entirely take over me. After putting on his shorts, he didn't come back to bed. Instead, he sat on the chair in the corner of the room and just started observing me. Being observed so carefully was both unnerving and sparked something unexplainable deep inside me. I kept my eyes shut, pretending to sleep, but how long could I truly keep up this act? Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and sat up. When my eyes met Gary's, I made sure my voice didn't waver, as I said, without disguising how I felt. "You're making me so thrilled, Gary." I could feel the words hang in the air. At that moment, I realized nothing would ever be the same again. Gary's eyes fluttered for a second, then he took a big breath and proceeded to talk. "I don't know, Carmen," he answered, his voice low but steady. "We've been residing under the same roof for a time now, ever since my dad's been away. And the more time we spend together, the more I feel for you. You might not know it, but sometimes I can't conceal the adoration I have for you. Right now, this feels like some kind of dream." His remarks caught me off guard, but they also sparked something inside me. Gary wasn't looking away. His eyes held mine with a type of honesty and intensity that had me absolutely enthralled. "I need to get up early to get the vehicle fixed," he went on, though his voice sounded like he was trying to convince himself. But his eyes didn't waver, not even a little. "But right now, I just can't take my eyes off you, Carmen. I've never felt this way before." My heart was racing. In that moment, I stepped to the edge of the bed and sat down on the chair square in front of him, my eyes fixed onto his. The energy between us was so tremendous, it didn't need words. We sat there in quiet for a bit before I puckered my lips slightly and set my eyes on him. "Gary," I answered softly, my voice holding both curiosity and a challenge. "Are we talking about the same thing?" Gary's stare intensified, like he wanted to live this moment via feelings rather than words. He didn't reply, but the expression in his eyes told it all. And that's when I understood there was no turning back for us. As I peered into his eyes, a burst of boldness and overpowering need welled up inside me. The mix of doubt and excitement in his eyes just pushed me farther. Taking a big breath, I proceeded to speak again, my voice calm but forceful. "Gary," I murmured, grabbing his complete attention. "When I came into the room, you were asleep. Your robe was a bit open, and I couldn't take my eyes off you. It got to me more than I thought. We can't run from these sentiments. We both know that." As my remarks hung in the air, I took a step forward and slowly stood up. His gaze followed my every move, his respiration increasing. I couldn't hold back the exhilaration rushing through me. My fingers moved for the ribbon on my dress, and as I carefully undid it, I could hear the shift in his respiration with every motion I made. "I guess," I murmured, my voice lowering to a whisper. "We need to level things out, Gary." I carefully unzipped the back of my dress. The cloth fell off my shoulders and went down to the floor. The cool air brushing over my skin just made the burning inside me flare more. The expression in his eyes told it all. Surprise, adoration, and a draw he couldn't resist. The stillness between us seemed like a link now, our breaths mingling into one another. Without breaking eye contact, I took another step toward him. "Now," I continued in a quiet voice, "we'll see whether we're actually talking about the same thing." Gary's eyes kept fixed on me, his emotions solid and full of fury. Suddenly, he rose up, never taking his focus off me, and turned on the room light. The warm illumination filled the room as he stepped over and shut the door. My heart started beating at that moment. It felt like the whole world had slowed down, leaving just the two of us. When he took a stride toward me, my breathing accelerated. He looked to be attempting to read my gaze, but at the same time, he was well aware of the wordless pull between us. As he moved closer, his hands grabbed my waist, and the warmth of his touch seemed like an electric current rushing through me. Without uttering a word, he leaned forward, his gaze descending to my lips. I didn't object. I couldn't. Everything about this seemed natural, like it was supposed to happen. When his lips finally reached mine, all the tension inside me melted away. His kiss was gentle and exploratory, yet conveyed an evident intensity. My hands involuntarily sought his shoulders, feeling their strength and warmth encircle me. The distance between us entirely dissolved when our breaths combined. That moment seemed like an eruption of all the unspoken feelings between us. Gary's freshness and vigor met with the depth of passion I'd held over the years. It was the start of something, a beginning both terrible and exciting. That night, there was no disguising what we felt for one another anymore. I let myself fall back into the bed, my body weary but my thoughts racing. My breathing was still unsteady. My foot brushed across the fabric of my garment, lying on the floor. I felt Gary's eyes on me, a strong and calm intensity flowing from his stare. A minute later, he stooped down and scooped up the garment, his fingertips delicately brushing over where my foot had been. Even that simple deed shot flames through me. As he held the garment for a second, I could see a flash of hesitation on his face, but it was swiftly replaced by resolve. He tossed the clothing aside, and his hand slid to the edge of the bed. Slowly, he crawled onto the mattress, his motions meticulous, deliberate. As he moved closer to me, the expression on his face reflected his sentiments, equal parts eagerness and magnetic desire. As I slept on the opposite side of the bed, I sensed Gary's proximity. My heart continued to race. My breathing intensified. When I watched him bending towards me, I knew that the space between us had nearly totally evaporated. It felt as if everything had reached a breaking point. There was no turning back, and what I felt inside me at that moment was tremendous. It hurt, yet it delighted me at the same time. I looked up at the ceiling, and I could see Gary's face, and I was attracted by the way he was back from his forehead with his hand. I could see in his eyes what Gary was experiencing. He was crimson. He was thrilled, and he was so joyful. I could see that he was doing everything with such enthusiasm, and I was struck by the way he was out of breath. Gary had rushed me and my emotions to the point where I was delighted. The automobile had broken down. "I'll never forget this hotel," Gary muttered in a shaky voice. His words pushed out, each one as heavy as a gulp of breath. His eyes were riveted on me, yet his hands were trembling slightly. His body was rigid, his muscles constricting, each action a bit more meticulous and precise. as if he wished to keep a memory. "I absolutely don't want my father to sell the automobile anymore," she added. And after these statements, he let himself fall next to me, closed his eyes without uttering a word, and waited for his breathing to recover. I was fatigued, and I didn't even have the strength to voice a word. My legs wouldn't stop convulsing, and I didn't even understand how I had fallen asleep. The next morning, Gary came with the car mended and informed me we needed to pick up Logan and travel to the city where he was. On the trip, I was overwhelmed with sadness and confused feelings, but at the same time, there was excitement inside me as I glanced at Gary. His gaze, his movements, everything about him was influencing me. Everything was so intricate, yet I still didn't know what would happen. I couldn't distinguish between the questions in my head and the exhilaration. There was just one thing I knew for sure. This travel would be the moment everything changed. If you've made it this far, I know my tale has excited you. Don't miss out on more. Hit the follow button, switch on alerts, and join us by leaving a comment on this story. I can't wait to hear your views.